¿no?
No es un texto de 35 minutos.
Ah, no. El moderador es estricto.
Pero yo tengo influencias.
Ya por esa empresa no es para ti, yo iba a poner. No, sí, para.
¿Tienes cuaderno, no? ¿Quieres una?
Sí, para hacer sus 5 minutos, sus 6 minutos.
Ah, yo tengo aquí 5 minutos.
No, pero lo va a hacer más bonito.
Ah, tú lo vas a hacer bien, quieres decir.
No, dije, más bonito.
Entonces primero, ¿quién? Luego,
¿Quién más que
¿quién?
falta?
Empezamos con Rosy,
Rosy.
¿Yo? ¿Yo era la última?
No,
luego
no,
Ricardo,
yo soy el último.
luego Ricardo,
Querido.
Tú empiezas.
luego Rafael, luego Yanisca, nos falta Yanisca, no está escrito Yanisca. Bueno, todavía no llega el público, así que.
¿Tienes otra cera ahí?
Otra.
¿Lapicero? Sí.
Me traje solamente
Entonces no me toca aquí. Bueno, está
Sí,
bien,
vamos
otra.
así. Yo soy el
ya.
último, tú la primera. Después de
un
Rosy,
papel.
¿quién va? Ricardo.
Rosy, Ricardo, Rafael, luego Yanisca y luego.
Yo estaba el último según, pero bueno, está bien.
¿Tú querías al último?
No, como sea.
¿No tienes un papel ahí?
Regala, tú tienes papel.
Después te lo
Rayado.
Pero va a ser rayado, me lo vas a rayar.
Pero vas a llevar una recordación.
Exacto, una obra de arte.
Va a ser una obra de arte mientras.
Aquí la luz.
Esas son las clases.
Este micrófono se puede quedar en pie. Uno se puede sacar aquí.
Sí.
Todo está bien.
No están acostumbrados a empezar a tiempo, ya me di cuenta. Dije 2:30 y dijeron, bueno.
Todo es todo es así.
Me gusta más.
Entonces esto.
Ok.
20 minutos. ¿Van a ser 20 minutos?
Tú avisas en cuánto tiempo, 10
¿Tú
y
nos vas
5.
a-
5 y 1.
No puede ser 10 y 5.
Sí.
No, 5 y 1 está bien.
Ah, bien.
5 y 1.
Sí,
No, es que yo
porque tú
quiero.
te
A saber cuándo vas a la mitad.
a él le dices tú.
No, es que yo creo que voy a hablar menos que 20, entonces quiero aprovechar bastante el primero.
Ok.
¿Por qué quieres hablar menos que 20? ¿Por qué 20 está bien, no?
Sí, está
Yo hablé
ótimo.
18.
Yo creo que si me pasó la...
Cuando viste que tenías más, te subiste.
Sí, ¿verdad? Bueno, nunca me llegó la señal del minuto. O sea, hablé 19.
Sí te llegó, pero no la viste.
Ah, ok. Eso es posible.
No, sí te llegó.
Misca, es la única que nos falta.
Entonces entendiste que
Sí.
si la inicias, le pausas y con este.
Ay, tu manita, hermano. Tu manita. ¿Cómo andas de dolor? Se ve rojísimo.
Sí. Esto es nuevo, esto acaba
De explotar.
pues. No se te olvide, Rafael.
Eso se le.
Rafael va a ir
Sí, sí, sí.
en tercer lugar.
Y Yanisca, ¿qué hacemos? Arrancamos en ella.
Yanica me dijo que iba a llegar.
La disca está aquí en la mesa.
Es que siempre aquí el transporte, no sé dónde esté, ya está en el Congreso. Aquí cerca.
En el Capitolio, ¿no?
Está en el Capitolio.
Pues yo supongo, bueno, no sé de dónde venga, porque también tiene a su suegro enfermo.
Todo lo que estás hablando se oye en la serie. No, yo solo se los comento.
No vayan a decir groserías.
Exactamente. Pórtense bien.
Que todo lo que hablamos
Todo
hoy
lo
en
que
la
están
sala
hablando
con el
aquí se
micrófono
oye en
está
la
bien.
sala.
El micrófono está verde.
Ya bien.
Entonces, si hablamos con puta, no creo.
Son no fales malas palabras.
Soy una plomada que lo puedo.
Un palabrón.
La
Usted
puta.
dice. Vale. Pues sí, ya le puse, ya estamos. ¿No? Que
La presentación está ahí.
la
tranquila.
liga es muy urgente para poderla compartir.
Sí,
Ya está el streaming.
Estamos en vivo, o sea, no solo nos oyen en la sala, nos están oyendo también en
No,
el mundo.
no, porque ponen una musiquita antes de empezar.
sí, hay que esperar a la música.
Hay que esperar la musiquita y después ya entra.
Viste que se me cayó una pluma. Se me cayó una pluma de la camisa y mira,
Ahí se te pegó.
se pegó aquí, exacto. Por la conversación con los pájaros. Cayó
Sí.
la pluma.
Aquella muchacha no está ahí, ¿no? La muchacha de los pájaros.
Estaba en la mañana estaba ahí. Primera llamada, primera.
Ya, todo el mundo le gusta sentarse a comprar.
¿Cuántas? Son 10 llamadas.
Ya está aquí.
Somos 4 para Putu.
4 y Rafa.
Ah, hay una. Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Bien, bien.
Hola.
Yo estaba en el portal, me dijeron que venían a las 2:30. No los vi entrar.
Pasamos, no, estabas en, no sé dónde. ¿Pero en qué parte estabas? ¿En ese lado?
En el portal de esta entrada, ahí, no sé bien orienta.
Segunda llamada, segunda.
Sí, sabía que era en el teatro, pero pensaba que ustedes iban a llegar a las 2:30 acá y los estaba esperando afuera. Y hace rato estoy diciendo, voy a entrar, porque pueden ser que estén dentro.
Qué bueno que estás.
Sí.
Sí, bueno, y porque entré con una compañera y me dijo, vamos a entrar. Y dije, sí, vamos, me siento a esperar.
Ya, sí, sí.
eso.
Que no da.
Poderia diminuir.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the audience today. We know that it's been a very busy week and we're all exhausted. And we've had very long working sessions. And we have a change. I want to introduce Jose Miguel and Marco. It is now Marcos who will be moderating this panel called Crossing from Education to Art. In the morning we were crossing from arts to education and artistic practices in the context of education. So I would like to introduce the new panelists who are joining us this afternoon. We have Rosy Zúñiga from Mexico, educator and popular communicator, feminist sociologist with a master's degree in regional rural development and international diploma of training of trainers in popular education, member of the strategic coordination team of the Council of Popular Education of Latin America and current Secretary General. She is a member of the board of directors of the Mexican Center for Community Development, and she also represents CCAL in the Social World Forum Secretariat. She has coordinated several popular education training programs in Mexico, Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe, Latin America, the United States, Asia, and Africa. So she's been all over the world, actively involved in this type of training. She has coordinated the National Methodological School and Latin American Workshop of Experience Systematization, the research workshop on impact of community development projects, and coordinated the training program for political and social action of the Mexican civil society called Forma, and co-coordinated the Virtual World Social Forum back in 2021 and the World Social Forum in Mexico in 2022. She's a co-founder of the Festival for the Dignity of the People's Arts to Breathe festival that was created back in 2020. On the other hand, we welcome Ricardo Almeida from Brazil, who was born in the border between Brazil and Uruguay. That's why a while ago I realized in the insistence in studying not only the Brazilian culture, but the connections we have with Uruguay. He is coordinating the cultural border movement. Since 2016, he was the advisor to the border committee, which groups mayors and cultural secretaries in the border between Brazil and Uruguay from 2015 to 2016. He was a UNESCO consultant in cooperation with the Brazilian Ministry of Culture to prepare the planned dialogue on the border Brazil with other South American countries. He was the director of the Department of Strategic Projects and manager of digital participation of the government of Rio Grande do Sul. In 2021, he produced a film and co-director and the web Mixturado. In 2022, he promoted an intercultural dialogue project promoted by the Indigenous Society Institute Caingan Inca with financing from Ibercultura Viva. He produced the first film festival of Jaraguao in the Uruguay-Brazil border and was hired by the Ibero-American Organization of States in cooperation with the Brazilian Ministry of Culture to organize trans-border programs in arts, culture, languages, and knowledge. Professor Rafael Mondragon from Mexico will join us online. He's a researcher of the Research Center of Humanities of UNAM and frequent cooperator in reading circles and workshops on popular education and related experiences to community art. Among his books, Rafael is a very productive intellectual. He has published several books, and he has co-authored other works like Literature as a Refuge, Palaces of Words Throughout the World in 2022, co-authored with Chefum Hamdi, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name of the author, A Life That Reemerges in the Borders, etc. And Schools as a Space for Utopia, Some Anarchist Proposals in 2018. He's currently coordinating the publishing cooperative Heredar. So without further ado, I grant the floor to the speakers. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention Janice Gallo, psychologist. I'm sorry. I'm always forgetting something. Jamiska Lugo, psychologist and popular educator from the International Solidarity Committee of the Martin Luther King Center. She's a professor of the Institute of Philosophy, and she works with solidarity movements in political training. Jamiska Lugo is Cuban, so her actions are carried out within our borders, so you're more than welcome. Good afternoon.
I want to welcome all those watching us online and face-to-face. I will be the moderator of this panel of these great people, and we are going to talk about two worlds that are possible. They are marvelous and wonderful persons. Let's start with Rosie, who will be talking about the crossing from education to art.
Buenas tardes. Bueno, yo por
Good afternoon. Well, first of all, I want to thank the invitation to be part of this 50th edition to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Biennial and 505th anniversary of the Havana city, and to express a solidarity with the Cuban people and with the Palestinians who are fighting for their life and dignity. Jose Miguel and Marcus invited me to be here to talk about the crossing from education to art. I would like to talk about popular art, which has been my endeavor from the last 40 years, first in Chiapas and now at a more global level. I'm headquartered in Guadalajara, Mexico. I would like to say that popular education is a political pedagogical proposal that bets on assuming ourselves as subjects of our own history to transform the world. This is a legacy from Martí, Simón Rodríguez, Freire, Nidia González, Cuban comrades who are also here, Esther Pérez, and many, many popular educators that we don't list. Popular education stems in a context of injustice and the struggle for the liberation of people. This morning we were asking ourselves why we talk about emancipation, and emancipation of whom. I think emancipation is emancipation of the people. We are not here to emancipate people, to emancipate themselves. Popular education was promoted in America and the Caribbean by men, women, people, autochthonous people, movements, and the patriarchal and capitalist system in which we live has tried to invisibilize the contribution of women, indigenous, and Afro populations. From our organization, we have the idea of promoting political training processes so that we can do what we can for change our realities. This political instrument began in 1982 in the framework of a revolution, the Nicaraguan Revolution. In this process, we have the movement networks of different educators. The first president was Paulo Freire, and later on, popular educators like Orlando Paes Borda. If you don't know him, you have to read his books. He talks about the science of the people, of building our own thoughts and ideas. With Paulo Freire, popular education is a method to learn to read the world, and the starting point is culture. He uses the symbols that have sense for the life of people, that are transformed in generating words. If you remember, and if you know Paulo Freire was born in the framework of a popular culture in Brazil, trying to research on symbols and daily praxis or daily activities. This is the basis of this method to learn to read the world. And then we have his other books, where he invites us to read our reality and question our own limitations. Cultural identity is the first step to build a conscious citizenship. That is the purpose of popular education, to form conscious citizens that can assume their reality and transform it. SEAL has been made up by poets, artists, many of the popular educators like Carlos Núñez had a group called The Voice of the People, and they played songs for the people, based on the people. And we have had poets, we have had storytellers like Paul Rey from Panama, who died on April 30, 2011, but we have his stories. We have the one entitled The Child and the Bomb, that talks about the wars and how disarmament is important. In 2019, SEAL, together with SEAL Brazil, well, we have representation in 20 Latin American and Caribbean countries, but the comrades from Brazil submitted their concern about the second exile, or Freire's exile from, I don't know if you know that he was appointed Patrono of Education in Brazil, but with the administration of Bolsonaro, they tried to remove this title. There was a great movement against this In the framework of this political context, on December, we launched a campaign to defend Paulo Freire's legacy. We wrote a manifesto that we invited the international community to sign and to act based on that manifest by carrying out festivals, meetings, and different actions. This campaign was launched 1 year before the 100th birthday of Paulo Freire, and we had a political cultural activity. We invited Anita Freire, Oscar Jara, Pedro Puntual, Yadira Rocha, many educators and popular artists to share with us their art and their thoughts about Freire. The comrade from Pernambuco composed a song called Letters of Professors to Paulo Freire. I can give you later on the link to hear the song. It's a very beautiful song. It talks about how his legacy will not die as long as there is an educator with very nice Brazilian rhythms, and it was circulating in different spaces. We have the Paulo Freire logo. Next, please. Next. This is Paulo Freire's logo. This is a t-shirt that we use in the campaign. Next slide, please. This t-shirt is different from this logo, and here you have the political cultural activity. It is in the networks, it's in the SEAL TV channel, and we are doing small capsules because some people don't want to watch a 3-hour documentary. So we began a process of transformation and reflection. We had a continental and global campaign, and with a lot of creativity. We had embroideries, we had festival songs. In Argentina, we have a book inviting the community of artists to write a book called Letters to Paulo Freire. The book is called Post Art or Mail Art. Next slide, please. As part of our process, we also participated in the feminist movement, and we call on women to build feminist pedagogies and methodologies. The first meeting was held in Guatemala with comrades from 7 countries. We had poetry, we had a cabaret show, the cabaret that uses us and converts us in a merchandise. And there is a Mexican song that talks about violence against girls, and we take songs that stigmatize us and we transform them on songs that give a political message.
Años. Ella es muy lista, 17 años, y odia a los machistas, 17 años. Es alegre, atrevida e inteligente, 17 años. Bueno, preciosa que la amo. Entonces esa canción...
We did other things with poems. This lyric are very important. This was in the framework of other actions that we have carried out after the pandemic, or during the pandemic. There was a lot of repression, and as I have so many friends in Latin America, I wrote to a comrade who is in Bolivia, and I said, I want to make a festival, let's have a concert, let's people come to sing, so that the web be used not only for meetings but also to relax and to have fun. I launched the idea, but Cultura Viva movement that have poetry, drama, music, dances, they took this initiative, and it was called Festival for the Dignity of People, Air to Breathe. And we have had experiences from Africa, Asia, Europe, United States, Mexico. And the emphasis of this process was that we don't want commercial artists to come and sing. We want the peoples to come and sing, to present their art and their fight. So we decided to have a process of fake or false persons live. So people send poems or songs, dramas with a maximum duration of 7 minutes. Okay. The idea was to share the different struggles, to have the involvement of men, women, people from the LGBTQ+, peasants. It's an impressive diversity of participants. It's a page that we have in SEAL's webpage, and we have had the participation of 29 countries with 119 experiences throughout these years. We have a number of artists here that could be part of the next festival. And I'm going to conclude in 2023. Given the situation in Palestine, we decided to join our voices against what is happening in Palestine and do what we do best, and that is street art as a form of protest. We began painting walls and denounced the genocide that has to be stopped. And we have been victim of repression. We have been attacked by the police. Fortunately, nobody has been in prison, but we are using art and poetry as a process for political education. Next slide. This is the book I mentioned, Male Art, Paulo Freire, during or in early 2000, the comrades of Index did a video called Builders of Dream. You can find it in internet, where Freire, it's a 20-minute video, and Freire says that the educator has to be sensitive. The educator has to be aesthetic, has to have taste. Education is a work of art. And that is the book I mentioned, and with this I conclude my presentation.
Muchísimas gracias, Rosy.
Thank you, Rosie. Now let's listen to Ricardo Almeida from the Brazil-Uruguay border, a comrade in arms. Good afternoon to all Cubans and Latin Americans in this room. I'm Brazilian, but I come from the border, so I'm going to speak in Portuguese, and I hope you understand me. We love mixture, or Portuñol, which is a mixture of Portuguese and Spanish, but also has influences of other languages. First of all, I want to thank Jorge for the invitation. This is the first time I'm in Havana, so this is a dream come true. So I'm extremely happy, and I will take back with me everything I'm learning here, not only for Brazil but for borders. I also wish to thank Jose Miguel, who's our comrade in our daily struggle, Marco also, and I am very comfortable speaking after Rossi, who's also a dear friend from the World Social Forum, whom we admire deeply. I'm also happy because she talks about Paulo Freire, who's one of the sources of inspiration of our movement of cultural borders. I will stand up so I can look at my slides and address you all. So, Paulo Freire, as I said, is a Brazilian, but he's worldly renowned for his work. He has a methodology of rethinking the meaning of words and interpretation of reality. And we, from the movement of cultural borders, which is a movement in 10 countries, not only in Brazil. Brazil has borders with 10 countries, but we're also in Mexico, Chile, that has no borders with Brazil. And our work is to reread our reality of all the Americas, not only of Latin America. I think you're familiar with this drawing, an Uruguayan from 1942, Joaquin. We used it to say that we are rethinking things. We don't want to say that they're on top and we're at the bottom, and that is the way things will remain forever. With a globalized world, things are changing, and I'm going to show you what we are discussing. I say, and our movement says, that there is no only art in art, that there is not only education in education, and there is not only economy in economy. Things are not in isolated squares or separated. Things communicate and interact. Economy has an interconnection with arts and with education. Things are not static, so we have to change our mind. I think this is a worldview But we who follow Paulo Freire, Carlos Marx, and in our praxis, different practices, not only my practice, but that of others, of peoples, of nations that have their own way of seeing the world, together with the people and communities, we are rereading and reinterpreting their realities, and we learn from them and with them doing so. So this image is our ultimate goal. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. The purpose, somebody talked this morning, said that utopias are disappearing. Yes, I do think, but we cannot let them disappear. So we have to create our new utopias, and we have created this one through the cultural dialogue promotion between countries and nations from national borders. I think this is very revolutionary, and this was a dream of so many, of Che, Bolivar, Fidel, several comrades before us who fought their entire lives to promote a dialogue among nations. This is what we're doing, and these are several ways of having a dialogue: through art, through culture, education. Then I will share with you what we call the School of Life, and then I'm going to show you live in our school, because many a times we confine education to schools, but you learn in your daily life, and there is pedagogy within the household, in your family, in your home, with your groups of peers that you are involved in, and the places in which you are. This movement was created back in 2010, so we have 14 years in the Brazilian borders with other countries to rethink notions of borders and promote cultural and artistic dialogues among the various nations. In each nation we have a representation group of people who does initiatives. It's not individuals alone. They should have an initiative that promotes a dialogue among nations. This is not activities in the border or of the border to promote a dialogue, because many times you work in a region and you want to include anything just for the sakes of being there in the border. No. That's not the case. For example, Marco does a very important work with the Mayan Indians in the border of Mexico and Guatemala. I do a lot of things in the border with Uruguay, and so on and so forth. Other comrades have different initiatives in different borders, because it is not the mere sum of cultures. There are several cultures that are in a constant dynamic of dialogue and mixtures. There is a lot of cultural hybridization, so to speak. And this is clearly seen in music and several other art expressions. So we believe in the process, not only in the event itself. Processes give rise to events, but if events conclude and nobody is left, then there is no sustainability. We must ensure our ideas and our dreams have continuity, as well as our dialogue. So I would like to show you how we do this in this project I'm involved in. This is a process of discussion over experiences and local and global life experiences. Local because we work with the communities, and global because this is not left within a specific community. It is up to communities, and Rosie could help me. Paulo Freire used to say that with one brick you can discover and build the world, so you must have creating word, a prompt, that something that prompts people to think and reason, and that they think in the longer term. That is our job, to provoke people, to invite them to think beyond their communities. So we do believe that experiences are important, but an experience without an analysis or critical thinking and a discussion. Once you have the experience, you need to stop and discuss it and analyze it, because there's a time to struggle, there's a time to hold the event, and there's a time to reflect, to discuss on what has happened, like the one we're having now. This is a time for us to discuss, debate, and reflect upon all these issues. There's a challenge here. I don't know if you follow me. In Brazil, it is often said that Brazil is the center of the world, but that is chauvinistic nationalism and childish nationalism. The thing is that China, that used to be in the right, is now on the left. And in the world trade, the Pacific Ocean is more used than the Atlantic Ocean. China is the biggest importer of Brazilian products and also from Argentinian products. So most vessels use the Pacific Ocean. And between Brazil and China, there are borders, right? So borders that were forgotten or neglected, of indigenous communities, persons who were rather isolated from the globalized world. But we are now in the center of economic global integration, and we are working to prevent culture from being forgotten or neglected. Otherwise, people will be marginalized, because capitalism is very aggressive. And people are, if you're not prepared, you will be worse off. Time flew by. We work with these three cultural dimensions: symbolic, which people identify as their own; economic culture, creation of jobs and livelihoods and income; and third, the organization for citizens to organize themselves, to promote no dialogue, etc. And this map was created by me in 2016, when I used to work for UNESCO. And discussing with communities, they told me, I live in La Pampa, in Las Misiones, in Madera Narea, so on and so forth. So they felt they belonged to a transborder area, not to Brazilian territory, but it is in Brazil, but it is also in the other side across the border. So people have the same customs and traditions, only the language changes. And we were not left there, Jose. We did not stay in the communities based on themes like music, portuñol. Any theme acquires a broader dimension that goes all the way to Cuba, Spain. Many other times the scope is smaller, but we create transborder routes. For example, rivers also contribute to expanding borders. When I was 19 years old, I read the work by a Cuban author who said there's a different way of looking at the world, which is more spiritual and not so Cartesian. And that Cuban was Alejo Carpentier when he talked about the magic realism. And these are some notions that I took from Alejo Carpentier at the time. For someone who's not from the region, this is a hill, but no. This is the hometown of Macunaíma. The people burned down, and this is a way of protecting the nations in Venezuela and the French Guyana. And there is a different way of looking at things than that's just a mountain, but no. That is where Macunaíma lives. Well, you cannot see very clearly, but these are the Jesuit Guarani missions in Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. 30 villages who make a remarkable work to raise awareness among communities, and they have a long-standing experience in community work. This is what we call the root of drums. In Brazil and Uruguay border, there's a lot of African influence of the enslaved Africans, particularly in this region of Uruguay. So we work the route of drums, which comes all the way down to Cuba in the Amazons. One thing is that the Amazon is only a jungle. No. There are computers, last generation computers, there are satellites, there's modernity and contemporary experiences. Of course, they maintain their traditions, but the contemporary and modern technology is present even within indigenous communities. That is a work of art of a friend of mine who's traveling the world, These are bulletproof vests that indigenous in South Brazil and Paraguay wear. This is become very popular, and these are visual arts. This work is called The Colonial Invasion. This is a work by a Paraguayan artist of Amerindia, which is a different type of interpreting reality. We work a lot with film because cinema and film is a way of disseminating messages. This is a Portuñol. This is a mixture language. We make seminars of Guarani mixed with Spanish, etc. And cultural celebrations when we invite other networks that do similar work to the one we make. We get together and organize activities for some periods of time. So it's not only us doing this type of action of we have katas, dando, and so on and so forth. This is something I like very much, because I was saying that the event cannot conclude and then we simply go back home. We have calendars for future activities, and these meetings are good for that. Not only to discuss, but to identify actions that we can undertake in the coming months, respecting autonomies. Autonomies are essential for the initiatives, but we want to find synergies and convergence. We need to reach an agreement among the various initiatives and their organizers. So we create, as I said, transborder cultural cores. There's a calendar which begins with a discussion, then we have the series of events and ends with a discussion. Symbolic actions that create jobs, livelihoods, and incomes.
Por favor, la próxima.
And not to say that I didn't talk about formal education. This intercultural school program began in 2005 from Venezuela to Uruguay, but the program was interrupted and we have not been able to renew it. So we would like to have it back. We are advocating for renewing this program. Not only primary school, there are many universities on border universities, and we are working to have these border intercultural schools, not to talk only about language, but also culture and knowledge. And the last slide, this is a source of provocation. This is Paulo Freire's statement. Education does not transform the world. It transforms the people, and people transform the world. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias, Ricardo.
Thank you, Ricardo. There is a lot to reflect. We need to transform people in order to transform the world. Now we have the participation from Rafael Mondragon from Mexico. We will be showing his video. He is in Mexico City and he is hearing this. He's connected, and he did this video to avoid any technical problem. I would have liked to do this face-to-face, but I have a sequel from the pandemic and I cannot travel. But I'm very much following what is happening in the event. I will follow the plan of the topic of this panel that starts with education and aiming art. Maybe it would be worthwhile to share a question on which we could collectively reflect. What does the Education Act means, and what do we teach when we teach something? Based on the hegemony, on the concept of this term that depends very much on the management of education, trying to achieve educational goals through curriculums and plans and programs, and that is very strongly linked to a technical aspect controlled by the bureaucracy of professors, teachers. We would have to rethink this idea that education is the transmission of a position, of a gesture, of a stand regarding the mystery of the world, its complexity, its beauty, and therefore the educational space is a space where we share and transmit gestures. It's a space of encounter, because the role of the teacher, of the professor, has to do with the capacity or skill of maintaining a space, a form of working with its voice and body to encourage collective participation, to imitate or build a common view of what is being experienced. And I think this is there is a very beauty expression of a Chinese Jean Levy. He has a book on Confucio. The last chapter of the book refers to what Jean Levy calls the choreography of life. Confucio not only conveyed statements, but also he had a way of dancing with his friends, his students, his disciples, and or pupils, sorry, and we have also the reflections of Spaniards who were exiled from Spain and went to Chile, Cuba, and Mexico, like Bartolomé Cosío and his followers, who talked about the pedagogical act was a way of interacting with the students. And he said, this action of being in contact with others is what constituted the basics of a professor and teacher. I think encounters are important to transform subjective positions. How an encounter impacted by the presence of the professor, the guidance of the professor, a walk through the neighborhood, watching a tree, experimenting with different painting techniques, the work on the body, dance, what can be transformed as part of an individual trajectory. It was understood that childhood was destiny, that there was a sociological analysis of what could be expected of a person based on his social class, his place of birth, his identity, his gender identity, and everything that can be transformed. The capacity of encounters to show others things that they knew but didn't know they knew, that they felt and didn't know they felt, or didn't know they feel. Augusto Groval proposes these coordinates, the way in which an encounter can make you observe yourself and observe different experiences, and how this can help to recover the mystery nature of experience itself, hindered by alienation, segregation, violence, structural violence that colonizes individual or internal experiences, and the need to foster and protect and dignify these spaces of encounter. That is very much what professors or teachers do. I think how much this is linked to a topic worked by the social movements of the 20th century. What William Morris said about beauty, beauty understood as something that is not only linked to a taste or ornament, but to the sensation derived from work well done, internal calmness, to celebrate what we do with our hands, to teach a trade, to recover that part of the experience that is linked to ambiguity, complexities, and subtlety, and how beauty is linked to the praxis of taking care of yourself. That is the art of life itself. The construction of spaces for relaxing, for embellishing those spaces that we use every day, where we cook, where we sit and talk, and where we work. And the link Morris established between beauty and work, the idea that beauty is the result of happiness, of joy, and spaces where life in community is built. And it's a space for contemplation. The book called The Conquest of Bread, talking about the Paris Commune events, he tried to imagine other rights, like the right of contemplating the stars, or of having a piano for the community, or the right to listen to music, the right to travel, the right to work, to walk together, linked also to a number of gestures that was developed by the anarchist pedagogy. Questions that allow the members of the community to see what has not been seen and share their own experiences, that they can celebrate those things that have not been observed and protected. Trees growing in the streets where we live, or where our school is located, the stories of our neighbors that live around that street, the possibility of helping them to convey their stories, build small exhibitions where the archive built with those small excursions has a certain type of language. To have an archive of stones, leaves, stories, fantasies, the idea that through this praxis and collective research, the knowledge of a curriculum can be delivered in an organic manner through questions that we make up collectively and help us to recover the ambiguous, profound, subtle, experience. And I think in the case of art, it's almost the same. Many times when we try to explain the good work of great teachers and professors, it's difficult. And sometimes we only explain or talk about their content of what they taught, but they build an invisible language, the same way a musician when he plays a piece, or a dancer when he dances, or the actor in a drama. It's an ephemeris act that exists in specific times and spaces linked to the presence and the big effects of which are prolonged effects, as if these invisible choreographies of our teachers and professors are part of the flesh of those who witness it and reemerges in the live gestures that students build or construct. And there is this emergence and re-emergence movement planting seeds with unforeseen results. This secret of how generations are linked through this education. It's the art of the transgenerationality, of the secrets and mysteries that compels us to think about the political issues beyond the junctures. Professors and teachers occupy a very important place in modern communities as guardian of transmitting or transmission from one generation to another. This is a function that institutionalizes something that is done in the household, and a task that in other civilizations and cultures was probably placed on the or in the ritual ceremonies in the old age space, the congregation of the elderly who were in charge of conveying stories and transmitting legacies, and they were very important transmitter of knowledge. That is the role of professors and teachers. In Mexico, maybe we are a little bit different from the situation in Cuba. Teachers and professors have been mistreated by different reforms. Sometimes they are considered as undisciplined. And this has brought about a weakness in trying to foster the trade or the profession. Their salaries are quite low, taking in consideration the living conditions in the country. That is why I go back to the idea of the need to defend the role of professors and teachers and their dignity. I said that, or I believe that the role of the teacher is very similar to the role of the artist. I wonder what is the impact of this. I train people and help people to learn how to train others. And of course, there is a technical knowledge on all this, in all this, that can be taught. Like the shoemaker teaches his apprentice to make a shoe by doing the shoe with him or her. When I do this with my apprentices and teach them how to teach a lesson, we also have to discuss what happened during that class. There are things that cannot be explained that are still an enigma, and things that we have to talk about indirectly, because I don't think there is a proper language. In this regard, the profession of the teacher or professor and the artist is like the profession of a magician. It's magic. This is not only a group of gestures and techniques, and it is not not only the ideas that can be exposed. So I think in this about these three fields of what is taught, what is done, and what is produced. And I think that probably each of us here have had an experience with this mystery that is produced and has a transforming effect or impact that makes that those who observe me, who are looking at me, become different persons. And I think that is the reason why many of us have become professors and teachers, because we have been transformed and we want to help to provide this transformation experience, this metamorphosis available to others. We have the experience that this enigma could be of use for others. And I think about what experiences regarding transformations you have. What are the secret and profound reasons for which you are here today, willing to share your views? Thank you. Thank you, Rafael. The action of professors and artists is like magic. This is what Rafael has said. Now I have the honor to introduce a great friend, Yamiska. It's a pleasure to have you here. I would like to hear Rafael again, because each idea is a question in the search we are all involved. to come to the Havana Biennial and be sitting here in this context is a position in the wake of the mystery that life is, of assuming exploration and research as the only path towards liberty. And it's a very painful path, a path of anguish. We are told that the world is like it is and there is nothing to do about it, but the ones who are sitting here, we are creators and we defend creativity. I was listening to Ramon Opol in the introduction of this event, and this is something one has to listen to and read several times. And I liked very much his call to understand that we are facing a civilization crisis. We are at a moment of transition where everything is moving, everything is being questioned. And what responsibility goes to the crisis of Western civilization, so that we can discuss these topics on education, art, and culture. This said, I think there are some questions, and that we must be aware that they are trying to interpolate us for the future. We are at a time where it seems that only the present is worthwhile, but it's increasingly more difficult to imagine the future, to feel the future. So we need to turn art in enjoyment, liberty as the election of being exploited, even of being exploited, people of as a subject that lacks many things. And this makes us deny a future of freedom or liberty. And if we do not get into the woods, we will only walk the path with little beautiful flowers, but that do not have the solution. Any talk or dialogue right now is very important. Education is an expression of culture, and it constitutes, Rafael said something very true to us. An absence of conflict cannot generate an emancipatory culture because it eliminates our concerns. You can't find it without concerns and without conflicts. So our search for harmony, our pursuit of harmony becomes a trap that makes us feel good today but limits our future. I think this is something we have to bear in mind. A colonized culture, a dependent culture, unaware of the fact that it is subordinated to the world system, does not generate a critical education that fosters a freedom. The big businessman of individual freedoms. I also wanted to talk about sovereignty, territory, and identity. There are many traps in that relationship. Sovereignty is not that we can do whatever we want, but the capacity to produce life with the historical, cultural, political, and identity traditions of a people or a community. Without sovereignty, there is no territory. With a territory without sovereignty cannot generate an identity that will include the plural subject that we are. So in a world where the fascist ideology is gaining ground and exclusion is gaining ground, how can we create a culture and art that will include the diversity we represent? An education that becomes a truly inclusive action with world concepts beyond the market and consumption. It seems easy, but it's not, because we have subjects that faced with the market in a world of social relations that does not go beyond competition. And that is not true. We can build another type of society. We have to try to create an education with a professor that can instill this in their students. Art is not. There are many more well-experienced persons here, but art is a process that has to escape from institutionality, order, because education centered in rationality alone limits the possibility of freedom. So art as an educational process beyond consciousness that would open interpretation paths that explores the footprint of human beings for new possibilities of free subjects is the commitment of any person who wants to know more about the mysteries of the world. We always learn. And the last relationship has to do with something that popular education taught me, the relation between the question and imagination. For educational processes, art is not the beginning, it's not a peripheral support, it's not something that overcomes boredom. It organizes a collective experience, a shared experience. It means to share, and a liberating epistemology, decolonizing subjects. In this relation, the question, wondering why things are like they are not whims, and these are paths that have to be built together so that we become responsible of the answer and build a new world. We cannot have to wait till this reaches everybody. We have to anticipate ourselves, and that requires a praxis. It's not a problem of creative discourses. It's not a problem of hours and hours of study. The problem is to imagine different praxis. There are many praxis of resilience that defend the culture of what we are, the resistance that has brought us here. That is why if we dare to see where are the distortions that affect us, where are the things that hide the rationale of oppression, which are many in the world we live in, means that we have to commit ourselves to imagine the answers and foresee what could be possible. That is analyzing reality, facing reality, and denouncing the most brutal machineries and the most kind machineries with which imperialism wants to keep us without questions, without dreams, and without imagination.
Pues
Listening to you nurtures our heart, Yamiska. And to conclude, let us all stand up. Let us stand up as earlier this morning.
Llegamos, Rosy, todavía.
Muy bien. Perfecto. Pues la verdad ha sido una mesa muy bella.
It's been a very nice roundtable discussion. All the presentations are closely linked, and I grant the floor to Jose Miguel González Casanova. It's an honor for us to have you here with us. Thank you, colleagues. I'm glad to join this panel of such distinguished and beloved colleagues. I would like to thank all the organizers, and I also would like to thank the technicians up there. I would like to begin with the sculpture I did 30 years ago, but that is a wonderful reference for what I'm going to say. This is a sculpture that is done with chewed gum and metallic typography, and I write from truth to right in a circle, and I think it was interested that finding the synonym and the more similar words. In 64 words, lies became truth, and the other way around, because it is a cycle. I will read it because I think it's interesting, and I am going to make reference to this, and it is interesting to see how gradually the meaning changes. Let's go from lies to truth. Lie, pretension, maneuver, deceive, use, utility, good, favor, thank you, wait, wisdom, imagination, idea, concept, knowledge, concept, consciousness, spirit, soul, principle, basis, law, statute, establishment, institution, creation, construction, building, work, occupation, activity, movement, motion, change, return, reversal, disorder, chaos, confusion, noise, disturbance, contingency, confrontation, question, doubt, suspicion, belief, faith, certainty, and truth. When I created this piece, it showed me that working visually or using a logic of art, I was able to understand other things. And when ordering all these words in a circle, if I had truth and lie in one side of the other of the circle, in the exact opposite half you had creation and institution. On the side of lie, institution, and on the side of truth, creation. And I wanted to say that we are moving within these two pairs of words in art and education, and a series of other pairs of words that I want to touch upon. In art, being creative that is the purpose of creation, but once the institution repeats models and becomes established, it is a system for domination, and then it shifts or leans towards lies. And that is precisely what's the point being creating. Perhaps the institution is okay when it is created, but when it repeats itself, then it becomes a problem. It becomes part of a system of domination. That is also the case of schools. Teaching and education, when it is knowledge creation, when it is instilling knowledge, is okay and is truly educational. But when education becomes an institution that repeats models of knowledge and becomes an imposition of knowledge, then it no longer is creative, but it is the imposition of a lie. And the same thing is valid for arts. Art, it can be creative, but then it starts circulating in the circuits of hegemonic art. It starts repeating itself, the same schemes, and then it is being used as a system of domination and control of people's sensitivities. I think that is one first good critical approach. Schools throughout history have been structured of domination. Nicholas Parry said that in school was idleness, is the use of spare time by the Greek, but then after the Romans, schools became a structure built on the rationale of the church, and that's why professors preach to students, passive students that are mere listeners, the truth of the professor. And then throughout time that becomes more sophisticated. During Napoleon times, schools had a sequence of years and degrees of production of the creation of learning, as students are the product in an assembly line like a car, and you add spare parts throughout your years as a student in schools. And finally, on that same idea of schools, we have the church school, factory school, and then market school, which is the one we're currently living in. What everything that is produced is a commodity, subject and object of the market, and you will go as a commodity into the labor market. That's not education. That is a system of domination and control. Art also undergoes the same process. We have the possibility in art of creating and producing works where we can convey a message, and once you enter a hegemonic distribution system, which are submitted to the rationale of the market, then you operate in an alienated manner. And then we have to think, who produces the work, where are those works distributed, and who consumes that work. Finally, the art that circulates internationally in the mainstream channels is because it's being bought by the elite that can afford to buy and collect works of art. So the sensitivity of that elite, of those social groups,
la sensibilidad común de lo que
is, as Haider, the Colombian, said, well, no, is that an indigenous artist enters the channels, but then you start seeing the same artists in all exhibitions. All of a sudden, they become fashionable and trendy, and it seems there are no other artists. Laura Castillo said, well, but we have to see how when an indigenous artist enters through these channels, they're rather assimilated and absorbed. So channels are operating, how they're operating in changing and distorting the meaning of works. I think that is important because no matter how much we manage to enter some representatives of different sensitivities, they ultimately work for I think audiences are as creative as artists in the divisions of roles between artist and audience, where the artist is allegedly the owner, and it tells the viewer, this is the work, that, and make it legitimate.
Sí, pasivamente sin más, ¿no? Esta es la
This is the proper sensitivity, but that is not the reality. Works mean whatever viewers make of them, and the sum of interpretation of a work is the meaning of a work of art. So what artists do is to give rise and unleash a process of creation. It's like it ignites a process of creation with the first spark, but then audiences and viewers interpret it and own both the artifact and the symbol and give it several and diverse meanings. And the more interpretations the work has, the more meaning and significance it has as a result of the summation of the various readings by audiences. The same thing happens between teachers and students. Teachers who provide the truth to students and share knowledge and imposes knowledge to students are also repeating this system of domination, reproducing this system of domination. If they don't consider that in truth knowledge exists, to the fact that a student, the student who's learning, embodies that knowledge, understands it, owns it, interprets it, and uses it in its daily life. So students are the ones who create knowledge, as it is audiences and viewers who give meaning to works when they embody it and interpret it and use it in their daily lives and contexts. Interestingly enough, the capitalist production system has or follows the same rationale or logic. The production system produces not for consumers, but creates and fabricates consumers. At the end of the production chain, you have consumers. And that's why we're living this ecological or environmental disaster, because they produce more to make more profits. They don't produce considering the needs of different types of consumers, but they make a mass production that is sold and advertised and then becomes necessary for consumers. And through advertising, consumers become part of the production chain as another producer. So this is a similar situation, the relationship between artists and viewers, teachers and students, and market and consumers, as you're a passive recipient in a top-down relationship, or you can have a horizontal relationship where viewers, students and consumers are the creators that are linked to the production. And this bottom-up approach and a horizontal relationship of creation by viewers, students and consumers. There is a an equalizing force of the culture of domination that simplifies everything and tries to make it equal and tries to erase differences. It was striking that Grossfogel in the first presentation plays Christendom in the beginning of this logic, or the genesis of this logic. I don't know if it has to do with monotheism or these dichotomies or dualities, these separating or dividing dualities or dichotomies. Is one thing is being an artist, a different thing is being a viewer or an audience or public. And in those pairs of or dualities, you have the relationship also of practice, the division between the individual and the collective, between law and cultural nature, inside, outside, quantitatively, qualitatively. All these dual concepts are announced as separate things and as separating things instead of seeing them in an integrated manner that, as you were saying, are integrated at the same time in other bigger and broader concepts. Original, multiple reality versus representation. I was listing some of these pairs or dividing dualities. Another thing I wanted to mention was, what is art? What art does is create words that we use to communicate with each other. A work of art communicates a message on the basis of a specific experience. For example, if we see the red study by Matisse, we all know it and we all share that, yes, it is very red, and that has shares a message, and we interpret it according to our own experiences, and it creates models of experiences that we'll share with cinema. If we watch a film that is a Hollywood action movie, we have an intuition of time that is completely different than when we watch a Russian film by Tarkovsky, let's say, where time seems to stand still. There's two different notions of time. Through experience, art creates a sensitive model of experience. And who creates those models? Each community. There are different sensitivities that create these models in the world of art. Usually they are harmonized and unified in trends and are exhausted and until boredom. There's a struggle to create this notion of homogeneity and doing away with differences and trying to equalize all eyes. But we can share and imagine the lives of others, reading a novel of another country, another context, and at a different time. We can imagine the life of others. That is one of the great values of art. Art creates community. It's been said a lot. Based on that common experience, you create a community. But beware, now that we are talking about communities, it is important that we make a distinction. The threats of community, between the truth and lies of communities, because communities under neoliberalism have become a system of social order that is replacing the citizens' responsibility vis-a-vis the rest of his society, and is becoming a responsibility of loyalty to the immediate surroundings that ignores differences but struggles on the basis of those peculiarities, and it is also a dividing element. So communities have an emancipating element in terms of creating communities and create and share a community, and it doesn't have to be the traditional communities which are often conservative as well, but creating different types of communities that emerge around an experience, like, let's say, a party, a celebration, and art can create communities through a work as well. And the same thing or a similar thing happens with identity. Is another thing that has been stolen. You steal an identity, as Grossfogel said about the theft of the identity of the left. They are stealing the slogans and of the left and become a repetition of established identities that have more to do with our affirmation of market targets. On the one hand, you have that nuance of identity, or you have the creative possibility of creatively creating identities. So that, again, we have the difference between institutions and creation. And I want to go back to the right to self-representation, of being able to represent ourselves. That is also a part of art. Art gives us the opportunity of representing our sensitivities, our identities, our own identities, our differences as well, and bring them to the highlight in a field where art and works of art and artistic experience should go beyond our immediate surroundings and be shared in other spaces. How each community, each difference has a right to represent itself. And we also run the risk of identity theft, which is something that is happening very often. Going back to identity theft, we have this idea of what is indigenous art. Could you talk about one single indigenous art? All indigenous have the same sensitivity, or feminist art? All women have the same sensitivity? All decolonized have the same sensitivity? My point is that we must be very cautious in this struggle of these differences. Many times these are stolen and used as part of the system of control and domination. Well, my time has run up, but we can elaborate later in the discussion. Thank you, Jose Miguel. This was a very interesting panel, very thought-provoking. It's been a real pleasure listening to you. This is all recorded for YouTube, so all of you, if you're interested in watching it, please watch it again. I would like to remind you that next Saturday in the Universal Hall of the Fine Arts Museum at the Baco Cafeteria, we are going to have a collective session. We invite you all to take part in this participatory conference, to have participatory discussions, not only for topics addressed by this panel, but everything that has been discussed these past few days. I want to invite Daniel and the speakers of this morning. What you talked about equalizing what's alternative is important, that we are aware of this duality and between artist, public, teacher, student, and producer, consumer. I also would like to go back to the beginning. Rossi said something that is crucial. We are subjects of our own history, and nobody can emancipate peoples. Peoples emancipate themselves and free themselves. And art is a pedagogic process. I just want to highlight some of the ideas that were shared here. I think it is essential what Ricardo said, the issue of cultural integration of the peoples in border territories. How we can break away these artificial borders through the cultural integration of nations. And the topic of symbolic, economic, and citizens' culture. Nothing is divided. Art is not divided from education or separated, and education is not separated from culture, and culture is not separated from economy, and certainly not from politics and the way in which we relate with each other, and certainly it is not separated from the issue of the environment. And we must find as much convergence as possible, of course. Through a dialectic vision, we need to find and identify where are those convergences. I think that educational act shares or helps us understand the mystery of the world, and I love that actions of teachers and professors resemble the work of magicians or alchemists. This is a poetic act.
And Janiska talked about a moment of transition and crisis, and we have talked about this during the morning session. The relation between education and culture is very important. You can't find emancipation without questioning the problem of sovereignty, territory, and identity, the relation of art as an educational process beyond consciousness, and the relation between question and imagination. To imagine different praxis. If we don't dare imagine other things, we cannot build new worlds. And Jose Miguel talked about that from the lie to the truth, there are only 64 words that are synonyms, the same number of boxes in chess, and the ADN is made up of 64 chromosomes. So I think this is something like magical math. Is there anything left? Well,
it's mathemagic.
A Q&A session. Rafa, goodbye. Do you want to make a question? Okay. You have the floor.
Hola, sí. Mira.
I want to talk I want to talk a little bit with Jose Miguel and Janiska. I think Jose would agree with me because I worked with Paulo Freire. I say that the future does not exist, but it's there where we are going to live. So praxis is here now. We have to develop a historical consciousness, and we have to reflect on this and define which will be the strategy. Otherwise, we would have to agree with Marcus that says that the philosophers have to occupy and analyze the world in different manner, but our duty is, or our task is, to transform it. And for that you need a historical and practical and sensitive consciousness. You talked about what is feasible now, right now, in this moment. I think it's that sometimes we need to know if we have a strategy or a dream, or if we have something to conquer or not. Because talking with Paulo Freire and the verb hope and not the verb wait, because people are moved by their dreams, not by their fear. People are moved by their dreams. And what is a dream? In border culture or transborder culture, we talked about that there are other dreams. We need to know what are the dreams, because otherwise we will just be demanding things, and we are going to die demanding things. We need dialogue. We need to build together. The other thing I wanted to ask you both or have your views is the fact that the new society stems from the old society, and it is not perfect. It's not like what we want. It's full of contradictions and conflicts, as you well said, and we have to be prepared. It is said that Che did not say we have to strengthen ourselves. I've heard Che's daughter Aleida. He never said that, but maybe he thought that one has to be strong to face conflicts. Imperialism is there, but we are not going to face it if we don't prepare ourselves. So what are we going to do to face these problems? I think that with the break, Cuba will be able to be liberated from that blockade in a few years' time, and I'm going to work for that. We cannot wait for the end of the world, because it's not going to end. We will disappear, but the world will continue. So I think we need to have a strategy. We need to have dreams, to share our dreams. And what are those dreams? The other day I heard somebody saying or talking about dependence and globalization and imperialism, but that is important. In Brazil, we don't discuss much about sovereignty, but there is also something important, and Fidel reminded us about it when Cubans went to Angola to fight. He said, "We are the same people." Remember, it's important. It's something that crosses border. Peoples are united in one way or the other by culture, by cultural legacy. I am from the Iberic culture. So I think we need to find the convergences and not try to limit ourselves to our own field of work.
¿Alguien del público? Pregunta, provocación, duda, regaño.
Any questions, remarks, comments by the audience? Nobody wants to say anything. I think they are tired. I want to make a comment. For 10 years, in the first decade of this century, I did a project called the Interactive Bank of Desire, Intersubjective Bank of Desire, and we had exchanges and representative surveys of desires. These were scientific and quantitative interviews in different cities, including Havana, Mexico. I was collecting answers in all Latin America, and what caught my attention was that in general, people desire what they think is possible. It's if they want a car, they were not thinking in an expensive car, but a modest car that they could afford. So their expectations were based on the real panorama. Curiously, this makes me very sad, because I began this project thinking that I would find many funny desires, but that was not the case. People between 25 and 35 years old, they had fantasies, impossible desires, or desires that would be impossible to fulfill. So I think before asking people to have a desire, you have to work so that people can dream other possibilities. I think that would be the answer from the experience of my project. Maybe that would be one of the functions of art and education, to be able to imagine other worlds. I think that in each country there are different types of dreams and desires. In Bolivia, for example, they recovered from a coup d'etat. In Colombia, they are still fighting. In Mexico, I don't know. In Brazil, the situation is difficult, but still there are people who dream. Well, I want to congratulate the 3 exercises we have carried out today. When I was asked to moderate today's session regarding education and art, I thought it was wonderful, because I'm the one who is related to education, understood in the strict meaning of the word. I have been working with you for a few months. You all know what we have done. This has generated a change in the way we conceived how to face these problems. We exercises within a classroom that we can change. When we broke for lunch, I was talking with Dr. Lázara Menéndez, who has been a revolutionary in the way of changing exercises. She teaches Caribbean art, and she decided to take her students to the Callejón de Hamlet for the class or lesson. I think that has been a renovating exercises. Some people say, well, you don't have data show to project the images there. And well, that doesn't matter, because they are there interacting with the social factors. And I think for an art student that leaves the academy with only 20% of what he will need in his profession, it's very important this type of exercises. And the biennials, the Havana biennials, where we have worked very hard, different institutions, the ministry, the Fine Arts Museum, the Wilfredo Lam Center, the curators, all this transforms and makes educational processes more inclusive. We have a reality in Cuba. There are different criteria on this reality, but undoubtedly this is a society that needs to reformulate itself in terms of education and rethink its goals from an educational point of view, covering from kindergarten to university. Professor Camila said we know how to change curriculums, how to change our educational programs for the art degree. I think this change is necessary because reality is much richer than the academy. This is a comment. I think that there was a dialogue, or our session has generated discussions and dialogue, so I want to thank you and tell you that on our side we are trying to do things for changing things. Thank you. Thank you, Ramila. This morning I said that any individual and collective transformation is a pedagogical act. And if this morning's session was fruitful, is the fact that there is an attempt for changing things. And for us, it's also an act of transformation to listen to you. Rafael Mondragon was there who wanted to say something, and Daniel also. Rafael, you have the floor. I'm very much moved to be with you today. These are experiences from which I have learned much. The role that art has as facilitator of a pedagogical process linked to desires, and the role of desire in the emancipatory processes and processes for social change. I think that we'll live in a world where
de consumo, ¿no? Pero también estos movimientos de ultraderecha que están creciendo en todo el mundo se caracterizan por un uso muy potente del potencial utópico del deseo, reconducido quizás hacia fines que no se vinculan necesariamente con la construcción de un mejor mundo. Y recordaba una anécdota que compartimos con un autor de novelas policiales hace algunos años, cuando en México explotó la violencia de la guerra de los cárteles del narcotráfico, Elmer Mendoza, que lleva algunas décadas dando talleres de creación en las cárceles en donde están los jóvenes que han sido capturados por trabajar como sicarios en el norte del país. Y bueno, pues él da talleres de creación y muy seguido se encuentra con que le preguntan, ¿no? ¿Para qué vale la pena enseñarles a escribir ficción, por ejemplo, ¿no? Y recuerdo que en aquella ocasión que hicimos una reunión de transformadores comunitarios para conversar con Elmer, había respuestas muy eruditas diciendo, bueno, la literatura sirve para entender mejor nuestra propia realidad social, para apropiarnos críticamente del mundo que nos rodea, ¿no? Y Elmer se reía y decía, miren, sí, el arte y la literatura pueden servir para eso, pero para eso también están pues, la historia y las ciencias sociales. Y ellos saben muy bien cuál es su realidad social, sus expectativas de vida de acuerdo a la clase de la que vienen, pero no necesariamente saben lo que son capaces de desear.
Te escuchamos.
Hola, hola.
Sí, te escuchamos, Rafa. Sí.
No, sí que me quedé porque se fue la señal. Bueno, en aquella reunión, Elmer lo que nos decía era que los chicos con los que
that meeting, he said that children with he worked knew more about their social reality more than us, but actually what could transform, no se oye.
Está en escena pública, esa fuerza del deseo. Y me pregunto por la posibilidad también de la educación mediada por el arte para educar un deseo que sea flexible, atento, sutil, que no redunde en la reivindicación de respuestas ya conocidas, que sabemos insuficientes, y que sea capaz como de tocar esos contenidos latentes de la realidad que se vinculan a un mundo distinto que se está viviendo finalmente, aunque no está observado, ¿no? Y creo que eso necesita mucha imaginación. Y que eso es algo que los activistas que vienen del mundo del arte a veces pueden hacer mejor que las personas que a veces encerrados en la lucha social, terminamos por hacer, digamos, formas de resistencia que son muy reactivas. Y bueno, eso quería compartir a la conversación colectiva que estamos construyendo.
Muchas gracias, Rafa. Vamos entonces con Daniel, luego con Rosy y José Miguel.
Es con respecto a esto de la escuela y también con respecto al futuro o el presente.
The future and the present where we can work. One of the myths is believing or thinking that it is only in schools that students learn. They learn everywhere and every time, and even after they finish school, I think that students go to school and then leave the school. The problem is those of us who are left in schools, so the possibility of change in schools on the basis of differences with students is for schools, the possibility. And I wanted to remind what Enrique Stuza said, what's in common with others to reach agreements, the pedagogical relationship, which is understanding differences as the major possibility of transforming each other, and erotic relationship, which is losing our individuality to create. And I think those are tools that schools should also have, not to have a final curriculum. The problem and mistake of schools is that you have to solve the problem and have one single curriculum, because no curriculum can work forever. You have to work out the transformation mechanisms. And I was reading something about the emerging order in self-generating systems, and this is very interesting because apparently they also fall in a cycle that has to do with construction and growth, and then an urgency when the growth starts to create instability and crisis, and then comes it's a cycle. Understanding that cycle, we can question the notion that if we all work together transforming the world, we will have a better world. I think we are all the time in a crisis, in an urgency, an emergency, growing and creating. It's a cycle. We have to stop thinking about the future and thinking in a cycle, a cyclic time, and we should fight always. The thing is that we need to change struggles as well. The problem is when the struggle maintains and perpetuates itself, and cycles are not fulfilled. So that is how we must understand the struggles of the present, and it is thanks to that struggle, and I fully understand what you said, that it is that what moves us is desire, but I think that crisis and emergencies also allow us to join and get together in issues that we may not agree on, and I think this is a good opportunity for organization. Very good. Rosy? First of all, I would like to say that I have enjoyed listening to you very much, and I was very glad to listen to what Janiska said from popular education. Objects should be questioned by subjects should question reality. We must understand that reality is diverse, is controversial, it entails conflicts which we should not evade. We have to confront and discuss them, and we should make a structural reading of the reality we're living so we can transform it. And according to what Daniel said, schools can be structured, but education is a process that takes place everywhere and all the time, and we need to implement it everywhere. There are artists here or individuals that are being trained to become artists, and they have the possibility of taking their art to communities and to take it away from institutions and museums and making or into liberating and militant transforming art. We need a lot of militants to face this system of oppression that we're living in, and I think it is getting more and more complicated to get rid of this system and free ourselves from that system. In Mesoamerica, we need to build a press or media of emancipation. We need to create a political system and become political subjects and consider what are the roadmaps to liberation. Desire is a rather capitalist notion. I prefer talking about dreams because it entails thinking, asking ourselves, how's my community, how I imagine my community, and we should be mobilized for transformation because, as Galeano said, paraphrasing someone who said these words, what is the point of the utopia? Well, it helps us walk by. We need to have it in front of us in the horizon. We shouldn't lose sight of it so we can dream and make it possible and fight to make it happen. Thank you.
Fernando Birri.
Yo creo que bueno que
So
I think that part of the purpose of these panels is to, by building this bridge from art and education, is that the mixture of practice is what
se vuelve alienante.
education itself is alienating. Art in itself is alienating when art looks at the audience that generates knowledge. Then it is not alienating because it is operating beyond this idea of art as a form and a merchandise. When education is creative, then introduces other types of artistic praxis, it is not alienating. Like the state discourse, I believe that I understand the desires, but I believe this that we need to decolonialize the imposition of rational over intuition, over personal experiences, and other types of experiences that and things that we can experiment with. The possibility of feeling, of thinking, of experimenting. Art generates knowledge by the test and error process. It is, I think, the artistic experience integrated to art can help us to emancipation and to have desires. Desires are limited by fear, by circumstances, and by the colonizing education that we have. So I think that I would bet on integration. The world is being partialized. Entities are separating from each other and fighting against each other, and it's not a problem of replacing that center, it's a problem of finding complex relationship models between realities and experiences. Sorry. Good afternoon, and thank you all for this panel, which I have enjoyed very much in all aspects, particularly because it is a well thought panel, a well argued panel, and a panel that has had a lot of intuition and poetry, and I think that has enriched us all. I just wanted to highlight something. You have been mentioning fear. You have talked about not having fear. You mentioned art. Or the perception of having an artist as genies, and that we will never be able. Well, sorry, I'm Danis Montes de Oca. I'm an art critic, and I worked with Jose Miguel in the theoretical event that I organized for many years in the biennials. But one of the things that the panel reminded me of were those discussions. Institutions also saw fear. I remember in those events, in those first editions that I organized, there were moments in which somebody made the audience come to the stage, and I was the organizer, and I said, well, what is going to happen here? First, the bureaucrats will come and eat me up, and secondly, I don't know what will really happen. I think it was Raúl Ferreira Balanque, if I remember well, and Jose Miguel came with some small heads, and I really collapsed. And I said, my God, the theoretical event will end. So we are always facing these types of situations in Cuba or in any other place, sometimes for things that are trivial, that have to do with poetry, with creativity, and with breaking with strict standards. So when I want to highlight something you mentioned, the role and guide of art as a fundamental aspect in these processes, because Jose Miguel talked about desire, but only art can allow us or teach us how to understand our desires. I don't think any other manifestations of the spirit or creativity will make us see in an unexplainable way the way in which we can overcome barriers and approach other forms of perceiving our realities and break away from our fears. So I thank you all, because you're artists and creators, for this great panel and the ideas you have shared with us, including our friend Rafael, who is not here with us but is here online, and we enjoyed very much his presentation. Thank you all. Any other comment, question? Somebody else? If not, then I inform you again, Saturday, 11 o'clock in the morning, we will have a collaborative congress to share dreams, desires, and many other things. Thank you.